Very good morning to you. Blessed 2023. So wonderful to see you here. I know you stayed up late last night, and part of the things you did last night was praying. Amen. You prayed throughout the night. Amen. And you made it to church. Come on, you deserve a big hand. And also those who are watching and worshiping online as well. To help us start our year strong, I thought of studying the book of Ecclesiastes. I know it's a very long name to pronounce. Ecclesiastes. And the next 6 weeks, we're going to be studying that. And I think to get the max out of this series is that you do your reading every day. Only 12 chapters, I think you can do at least 3 rounds, all right, for the next 6 weeks. If you have started the reading, that is even better. So today's message will be easier for you to understand. If the book of Job is known for undeserved sufferings, we talked about this a few months ago. The book of Psalms for comfort and worship. The book of Proverbs for wisdom. Then the book of Ecclesiastes is known for life, meaning of life, and really, I think to be more specific, the realism of life. The book of Ecclesiastes, most people misunderstood this book, including myself, before I dive into this the last few months. It speaks of life very honestly and very vividly. I've not come across, Job as well. Other than that, most books of the Bible are, I think, too spiritual. But Ecclesiastes is really, it's very straight and very pointed in terms of talking about the admission of a person that is King Solomon himself, about his experience of life. But he is not complaining about life. He's not discontented about life. Instead, he is sharing with us a continuation of life after the fall of Adam and Eve. Okay, I'm going to dive into that a little bit more. Now, contrary to some popular Christian belief and teaching, life is not always positive. Life is not always peaceful and prosperous. I think a lot of us here, you are so relieved to hear this statement from this stage. Because so many times, life is frightening and frustrating, and let us admit it, unfulfilling. And this is what Ecclesiastes talks about. But mind you, he is not complaining. He is not being discontented. Not at all. Okay, there is an intention behind it, which I'll reveal it to you later. So in this book, Ecclesiastes, when you take time to read it, and as we go through it the next 6 weeks, basically he's telling us life is harsh, life is hard, but there is hope because God is still at work. Now, it is important for us to be on the onset to realize that the author is not dismissing God or questioning the existence of God. In fact, this book affirms God and his activity here on earth. You notice there are a few keywords in this book. Noteworthy would be the word under the sun. That appears 37 to 38 times. And simply tells us the realm where we are in. Anything that is under the sun here on earth, it is our realm. You and I, our activities, our domain, as it were. But then there is another keyword that is the word in heaven, appearing close to 40 times. Okay, and this is very deliberate and intentional, emphasizing where God is, his realm, his space. And yet God is interested and he cares and he's active here on earth. Ecclesiastes chapter 5 verse 2 combines the two realms together. Only one verse. He talks about God is in heaven and you are on earth. But God and man, heaven and earth, are very much connected, not disconnected. All right? So for today, I want to start off with some background so that you appreciate the next 5 weeks because we're going really fast. 12 chapters, the next 5 weeks. The first thing is this, you notice at the beginning and at the end of this book, chapter 1 verse 2 and chapter 12 verse 8, there is this word called vanity of vanities. Depending on what Bible translation you are reading from, or the word meaningless. Now, the word meaningless, you must take note, does not mean that life has no meaning. I know the English word meaningless seems to convey that, but when you look at the Hebrew word, it is not, which I will define that for you in a little while. But at the beginning and at the end of the book, you have the phrase, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Okay, so this phrase appears twice. Now, it is even more important that you notice that right after chapter 1, verse 2, when the phrase appears, there is a beautiful poem. And that poem is about man's work on earth, man's toil on earth. Right before chapter 12, verse 8, the word vanity of vanities and all its vanities appeared. There is also another poem. And that poem is on the age of man. Okay? So I think this is significant. There are 3 poems in this book, at least. The other poem is chapter 3, which I expounded yesterday at the New Year Eve service. Okay? But these 2 poems, when you put them together, talks about the age and then the activity on earth. The age and the activity. Chapter 1 is the activity, the work and the toil. And chapter 12 is the age. He talks about the youth and the old age. Talks about the time and the task. They are interrelated and connected. So time is the chronos. Yesterday I talked about this. So 2023 is a time, it's a new year, which is chronos. Your clock ticks and ticks and ticks, and then we say countdown, and it's 2023. You can't change that. All right? So that is chronos. But then the activities would be, or the work, would be the seasons, we call it. I know some people can't differentiate between time and seasons, all right? Seasons, meaning the activity, in the Greek word, it is the kairos. So time and task. Okay? So there are 2 connected words where the time and the task must match one another. So it's 11 o'clock, that is the time. The task is worshiping here at church, right? It would be wrong if you're out there having lunch. That is not the right thing to do at this time. Lunch is 12:30. So we shouldn't be staying at 12:30 here. Okay, so it must match. So there is such thing as age appropriate according to the time. So if you are 18 years old, okay, let's do it. If you're 15 years old, you're not supposed to be married yet. Not supposed to. You're underage. Okay, so there are many activities that are bound to the age. So the book of Ecclesiastes started out strong, differentiating the 2. So all of us are bound and limited by our age and our activities here on earth. So when you read the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, which we are not preaching that sermon in the next weeks, we talked about it yesterday already. He talks about, he gives us a list of 14 opposites of tasks or events, the kairos, that happens according to the variety in terms of diversity of activities here on earth that all of us will experience. But the question is when. There's a time to give birth, there's a time of death. There's time to love, there's a time to hate, right? There's a time for peace, there's a time for war. So each one of us, the seasons are different. Okay, so enough for that. So let's come to the entire book, how you divide the book of Ecclesiastes, 12 chapters. Now, most scholars will tell it's very difficult to structure this book because it's poetic. When it comes to poetic, there's no structure. There's a flow. You flow with the emotions, not the cognitive when you structure it clearly. But I think there is a way that you can structure it that will make sense for you in your reading. Okay, so listen carefully. The first 6 chapters is one portion, and then chapter 7 to chapter 12, another 6 chapters is the second portion. The first portion has 7 repeated words, phrase. And you notice the phrase from the ESV Bible is all is vanity and a striving after wind. Or NIV uses chasing after the wind. This phrase appears 7 times. All is vanity and a striving after wind. So simply tells us the first half of this book, of this poem, is the investigation of life. Man is searching and seeking, investigating what life is all about. Okay? And it tells us the meaninglessness of life without God. The second half of the book has also 7 repetitive words, and the word ESV Bible is not find out or do not know. Basically have the same meaning, the ignorance of life. As men investigate the meaning of life, man will come to a conclusion, his ignorance of life, but yet life can be meaningful with God, and even the simplest of all activities like eating and drinking and laboring can be meaningful when God is in the equation. Okay, I hope you understand this now. Okay? But without God, even the most complicated and complex tasks can be unproductive. But with God, the simplest of tasks can be meaningful and deep. All right? So today, let's begin with the topic I'm addressing. Is life worth living? This is a question that the author is seeking to answer. Is life worth living? The author had everything. He had fame, he had family, he had a fortune. He had wisdom, he had women, he had wine, he had wealth. He had songs, slaves, and silver, and yet he was unsatisfied. But again, let me say this. He was not complaining. He is not discontented. Okay? There's a reason why he's writing this book, okay, which I will answer that question later. Okay? I think the same is true for all of us here. We are constantly asking this question, is my life worth living? As you come to the beginning of the year, I think we are revisiting this question. Is my life worth living? I'm entering into 2023, my chronos. But what is the kairos moment? All right? So, is my life worth living? Is the time worth giving? My 2023. And all of us possibly may have a lot in life already, like the author. Or some of us may have nothing in life, and still we ask this question. Whether you are a believer or not a believer, you ask this question too. The only difference is how honest are you? And most Christians are less honest about this question. Okay? So, let me give you 3 things as a background to kick off the sermon series. Okay, simple, very simple and basic in order to help us in the next 5 weeks. The first point, who is the author? When you know the author and the intention of the author, it helps a lot when you dive into the book. Chapter 1, verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So obviously, to save time, it is King Solomon, the wisest man on earth. And therefore, the beautiful writing here of this book and Song of Songs, which we will also talk about it sometime this year. A wealthy man, a powerful man, a well-known person, a religious person as well. I think he has literally experienced everything under the sun. If there is a man who is most qualified to write this book or to compile this book, why you use the word compile? There's a reason. We won't answer the question now. Okay, I think there would be no other, than Solomon himself. What is the occasion of this book? There is a Hebrew title to this book, and it is Kohelet. Kohelet, you might have heard of this name. And that is the word Kohelet simply means to assemble. To assemble, like Avenger, to assemble. All the superheroes assemble, and literally that is. And in the English title, you have the word Ecclesiastes, which comes from the Greek word. And the Greek word is ecclesia. So ecclesia is assembling right here. Literally, the word ik, it is to call out. Ik is to call out. So you're being called out from your homes, from different parts of Hong Kong today, to gather together to assemble. So the author here is assembling the people, young and old alike, rich and poor, religious and non-religious people, men and women, everyone together, and began to now teach the Word of God. Because the book of Ecclesiastes is relevant to all people. Okay? But if there is one group specifically Ecclesiastes is written for, it would be to younger people. What age, Pastor Ed? Young at heart. How about that? Okay? I'm serious. Because, for example, when you come to chapter 11, verse 9, he said, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth." Very specific. Chapter 12, verse 1, "Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth." So if there is one particular group that he's zeroing in, narrowing to, speak to, would be young people. Why? Because young people have so much potential ahead of them. So many more years ahead of them. And before they make the blunders and the mistakes, here, King Solomon is like a spiritual father. If you read the tone of Ecclesiastes, you sense that. You know, the tone of a mentor, of an older man here trying to speak to younger men and women. And specifically to younger men and women working in the palace, in governmental position. He talks about everything in life. He talks about authority. He talks about how to submit to your employer. He talks about women. Wow. He talks about marriage. He talks about money. He talks about not being careless when you go to work, because accidents happen at the workplace. Very detailed and specific. We'll come to that, all right? So he's speaking to young people. Let me pause here for a moment. For all of us who are young and young at heart, there is a relevancy for all of us here that God wants us to be wise in how we live. As you pursue marriage, when you pursue in building a family, your career, accumulating your wealth, and for some of us, retiring, and all of those things that your kairos moment, as we talk about, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, the seasons that you're in, it says that there is a word of wisdom for all of us here. Okay, for 2023. No, the third part, which is the last part of this message, which is going to be the longest one. What is the word vanity of vanities? I started off, this key phrase appears in chapter 1 at the beginning and then ended with chapter 12, verse 8. What does this word mean? You see, as I prepared this message, right immediately after, just before we finished the book of Job, I wrestled with the preparation. I have an idea of this book. Of course, I've read the book. I've actually also written a devotion of this book, actually, many, many years ago, about 15 years ago. Then I realized that I got nothing to write. Not because I do not know this book, but rather because I do not understand the book. I could not capture the book. You know what I mean? I could not comprehend the book. And I wrestle, and then finally, I said, let's begin with the keyword. The keyword of this book is vanity of vanities. In fact, the word vanity appears 38 times in this book. Okay, the most frequent word appeared. In fact, the word vanity appears 73 times in the Old Testament, but 38 times, meaning more than half, occurrence of this word specifically found in this book. So it must be something very important. So what is the meaning of this name, of this word? In the Hebrew word, it is Havel. I know some people pronounce it as Hevel. I call it Habel, H-E-B-E-L or H-E-V-E-L. Very important word. English translation, not so good translation, uses the word meaningless. Havel. So the word Havel have two meanings. The first, for us to understand, is the brevity of life. So literally, the word Havel is mist, vapor, breath. That life is brief. It doesn't matter how long you're going to live. You're going to live up to 120 years, but still, it's a brief, very short life. We usually say somebody who died at the age of 40, oh, premature death, short life. To me, even 120 is still short. The brevity of life. And that everything will go away and can go away. Your life. Including your money, your wealth, everything that you achieve here on earth. I think that is very humbling. Let me pause here for a moment. I know we know it, but let me say this. All that you have right now, all your properties, all your money, everything that you have can go away just like that. Yeah. It can go away in just 1 second right now at this moment. You know that? And that is humbling and frightening. And that is Havel, the brevity of life. The second meaning, I think it complements, Havel means the absurdity of life. Life is mysterious. It doesn't make sense. Not the meaninglessness of life, but the mysteriousness of life. Life is absurd. Many times it's confusing and contradicting. In fact, the absurdity of life is that all our activities can be unproductive. And that is humbling as well. You see, in Hong Kong, nobody wants to say, I got nothing to do. Everyone wants to fill up their calendar, already filled up by now. Before the year begins, I open my calendar and I begin to plan everything. I'm serious, me. Because we want to be busy. If you're not busy, you're a loser. So here, even at the age of retirement, we should always be active but not busy. You must understand that there's a world of difference, being active and being busy. Okay? It's a terrible feeling. Okay, so we're busy. But the question is, are we productive? In ministry, no pastors want to be doing nothing, all right? Especially on a Sunday, by the way. For the last 4 weeks, I wasn't preaching. I was sitting there. It's like, oh, I'm getting nervous. Okay. So he talks about absurdity of life. You can be so busy, doing so many things, but unproductive, not bearing fruits. And we understand that. 2021 was a year where we worried about our health. Will I survive this pandemic? Then 2022 is a year we worry about our wealth. Right? A lot of us lost a lot of money. Your retirement savings gone. You said, not at this time. Some of us haven't yet even started our career. The competition has begun. And what about 2023? What are we going to worry about? Health, wealth, what's next? I don't know. Right? So, so brevity and absurdity, okay, it's important for us to understand Havel. So I was struggling with this word, all right? So I understand this. It's not difficult to get those information that I just give to you. And then I asked myself this question. I think in Bible study, it's important to ask questions. We call observation. So I asked this question. When was the first time the word Havel appeared in the Bible? Simple question, but I don't know how to answer this. I did a research and I found out the word Havel appears in the book of Genesis chapter 4. It's the name of a person called Abel. Same Hebrew word, Abel. And I decided to call my friend in Israel, in Jerusalem, Aaron Labado. He's from the tribe of Levites. Not spoken to him for over 10 years. Rang him up. I said, Aaron, what does this word mean in modern Hebrew today? Havel. He got shocked. To cut the long story short, he said, Havel is the name of a person. It's Aaron. And his name is Abel. It's Abel. And today in Jerusalem, in Israel, when you use the word Havel, it's an expression. The expression is, oh, what a shame, what a pity. I mean, in our culture, we use that phrase too. What a shame, what a pity. Because it is like the life of Abel, the brevity of his life and the absurdity of his life. What absurd? I'm going to tell you later. It was so brief, in just a few verses in Scripture, and he's gone, like a vapor, a mist in the air. And this is how it's being used today in modern day Israel. So the book of Ecclesiastes is about a person. And this person is called Abel. So when you replace the word Havel or the word vanity in your Bible, when you read it again today and the next few days, every chapter, except chapter 10, there is a name, there is a phrase vanity. That word vanity, replace it with Abel. So, Abel of Abels, all is Abel, for example. Then suddenly you understand this book quite differently. It's about a person. It's not some philosophy or some idea. It's not about a complaint or discontentment of the author, but it is a continuation from the life of Abel in Genesis 4. What life is like and what is life all about after Adam and Eve sinned. Not from a theological angle, but from a practical angle. The theology of the fallenness of man, many books of the Bible talks about it, directly and indirectly. Romans is one that is most direct. But I think the book of Ecclesiastes is the only one that talks about the practicality, the implications of the fall of man, life outside the Garden of Eden. And Abel is the personification of the fallen man, not Adam, but Abel. So, next week I'm going to talk about Cain, okay? In the book of Ecclesiastes, he make a comparison. There are two ways to live outside the garden. To be the sons of Abel or the sons of Cain. What are the differences? I'm going to give you a little bit today, and then next week we're going to complete that Cain and Abel thing, okay? So that is beautiful. It's almost like the book of Ecclesiastes should be put right after Genesis chapter 4. Okay? So because many times we identify the fallenness of man to Adam. But this book connects us back to Abel. And how we can identify with him. Okay, you're yawning. Look at Genesis chapter 4. You were praying last night, I know. Now you're yawning. It's fine. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1. Let us revisit this story, okay? This is exciting to me, all right? And listen carefully. Now, Adam knew Eve. Now, knew doesn't mean he knew intellectually. Knew is yada. Hebrew means he has a physical or in relationship with Eve, his wife. And she conceived and bore Cain. Cain is the firstborn. Saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. The name Cain literally means I have gotten. Or possess, I have gained, I have attained. That's the name Cain. Cain. Next week, you're going to be looking at that name. Interesting. Verse 2. And again she bore, did you notice he, instead of saying Abel, he said his brother Abel. Now, that's the evidence of the name Cain means you belong to me. I gain you. You are mine. I attain you. So his brother Abel, that's the spirit of Cain right there. So Abel's name never stand alone. He always is belong, connected to someone. Now, Abel was a keeper of sheep and Cain a worker of the ground. In the course of time, meaning at the end of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and of the fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering he had no regard. Did you notice the first two activities that happens outside the garden? The first one is work, right? Cain and Abel, they both work. The second is worship. You notice that? Work and worship. Let me pause here for a moment. You know this truth, but it's good to talk about it. The work and worship should be balanced. The setting, we live in such a materialistic world today. People just work. No time for worship. They are worker but not worshiper. But there are a small percentage of people just worship. They never work. Come on, give Jesus a big hand. Come on. We need to rebuke some people like that, you know. They're just worshiper. They're not good at working. Even church, we can't employ them, you know. Okay, let's move on. Okay. And he says, so Cain was very angry and his face fell. The Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. Cain spoke to Abel, his brother. You see? Abel, his brother. And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel, and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is Abel, your brother? And he said, I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. Now, you see, when you read this story, you begin to notice the brevity of Abel's life. He was only mentioned in a few verses. And every time he was mentioned, in reference to his brother. It was quite a loser, living Abel's life. Very sad. He worked, he went to church, he worshiped, then he died. And the way he died, he got killed. He got killed by someone who went to church with him. Because Cain went to worship too, right? And the worst thing is that he had no heir. He had no family. He's not married. Poor guy. So who inherited all he had? I think it must be Cain, his brother. That's not the way to live your life. The brevity of life, Abel. But then the absurdity of life, that's another thing. It just don't make sense to me that the first righteous man, Abel is the first righteous man on earth after the fall of Adam and Eve, has such a short life. I think we all agree good things should happen to good people. But for the case of Abel, definitely not so. In fact, it is quite upsetting to me, even reflecting on the life of Abel, that God did not spare him nor protect him. In fact, God spoke to Cain, warned Cain about his murderous act. I thought God should be warning Abel. Tell Abel, I give you a prophetic word. When your brother called you to the field, don't go. God didn't even warn Abel. And Abel was worshiping God and God didn't give him the prophetic word. To me, that is ridiculous. I mean, if you read on the story, next week we will, about Cain, what happened after this. After he killed his brother, you know what God did? God came and had a conversation with him. I mean, God, you didn't know he killed his brother? Well, you asked him. Punish him. Zap him. God still had the time and the patience to have this conversation with Cain. And this is not the worst. The worst is God did not punish Cain. In fact, Cain negotiated with God, lied to God, then negotiated with God. He said, now that they know I killed Abel, they're going to take my life. Can you put a seal of protection over me, a mark of protection? And God gave in. You protected the wrong person, God. You should have protected Abel. Instead, you protected Cain, the criminal. Don't make sense to me. The absurdity of life. There are so many things that Ecclesiastes later on talks about. The absurdity of life. It's absurd. It's crazy. It makes you angry when you read it. Okay, well, let me give you one example. He talks about an unrighteous person at his funeral. People say all good things about him. Oh, that makes you boil. And everybody play along and lied. I mean, it's right there in the book, Ecclesiastes. We'll come to that one. Wow. What is this life all about? Okay. No, I'm going to just go straight to the lessons that we learn. What are we to learn? Sons of Abel, sons of Cain. Be like Abel in this story. Your life may be brief. It may be absurd. But be like Abel. Work. It is not unspiritual to work. I don't understand. Some very spiritual people think it's unspiritual to work. Number 2, worship God. In fact, the book of in the New Testament, Hebrews 11 verse 4, he said, by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain. If Abel did not work, he would not be able to worship. You understand? I think that is true. If you don't work, you can't worship. You have nothing to offer. Hello? If you don't work, you got nothing to worship. Seriously. All right? So, by faith, Abel offered to God a more acceptable sacrifice than Cain, through which he was commended as righteous. The first righteous man in the Bible is not Adam, it is Abel. Adam is perfect man, the spiritual man. Abel is the righteous man, the first one. God commending him by accepting his gifts, and through his faith, though he died, he still speaks. Look at 1 John chapter 3, verse 12. We should not be like Cain, who was the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own deeds were evil. And you mean he offered God's sacrifice were evil too? Yes. Next week we'll talk about it. And his brothers righteous. So Abel, a righteous person. Be like Abel. But Pastor Ed, I don't want to be like Abel. His life was brief. His life was absurd. He looks like a loser. What do we gain from Abel? Let me finish the story now, then we'll close. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 25. Okay, listen. I don't think it's on the screen. Verse 25. This is after the encounter Cain and Abel, and after Abel died. Okay, verse 25. And Adam knew, which is Yada, his wife again. Meaning that if Abel did not die, then Adam would not know his wife again. You see, the word again. It's the outcome, the results of that death. And she bore a son and called his name Seth. The name Seth means God has appointed. God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel. You must recognize this word, instead, to replace Abel. So there is something good that came out of this death, this brevity and absurdity of Abel's life. For Cain killed him, verse 26, to Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. Now, Cain also gave birth to a son, and his son's name is called Enoch. That is the fake Enosh. There is always a fake version, you know, the fufu version, Enoch. But the real is Enosh. Enosh, at that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Did you see this? The results of an untimely death that most of us would shun away. If it is not for that death, the sacrifice of Abel, there will be no Seth, there will be no Enosh, and there will be no people who will begin to call upon the name of the Lord. Are you catching this? Are you okay? All right? I hope our time is not Abel. It's not wasted. Are you okay? Now, I'm coming to a close. When you read Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 15, now ties this prophecy or this incident of Genesis chapter 4 of Seth and Enosh into Ecclesiastes now, all right? You look at chapter 4, verse 15 from the NASB Bible. You see, I told you before, for a literal translation that is good for Bible study, I recommended ESV Bible, and there is another translation that is the NASB Bible. Both are very literal. So he says, I have seen all those living under the sun move to the side of the second youth who replaces him. There is a second youth who replaces him, Abel. Okay? Another translation uses the word, the second one replaces the first. This is a prophetic word that points to Seth. Seth replaces Abel. So a life of Abel results in a second one who replaces the first. Who is second one, Pastor Ed? The second one Paul talks about is Jesus. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 45. We're closing, all right? The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. But it is not the spiritual that is first, but the natural, and then the spiritual. The first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. He's talking about Jesus. So, in this Abel, in this life of meaninglessness that we read in the book of Ecclesiastes, he tells us there is a meaning that we can find in the harshness, the hostility of this life on earth. There is hope, and the hope is Jesus Christ himself, the second brother who replaces the first. That with Jesus, even the simplest act of eating and drinking, you can find meaning. So, Jesus is the one that you discover in Ecclesiastes. Rather than you close the chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes, and say, everything is meaninglessness. No. But with Jesus. You know, you come here today, you want to begin the year strong. You want something tangible. You want something practical, right? You don't want to listen to some boring Bible lecture, right? You want something real. Let me close with this. The book of Isaiah 43 verse 18. I shared this yesterday. And I tied that back to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Kairos and Chronos. Let me leave this wisdom with you. Isaiah was written in a time where the Israelites were in exile. They have experienced the luxury of life, the beauty and the glory of Jerusalem. Now they're in exile. It's almost like a pandemic situation. And they were really lost and discouraged. And Isaiah released this word. He said, forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. Can you touch your neighbor and say, forget? Don't forget the lessons you learned from the past. Don't forget the people that have helped you in the past. All the other things you can forget. Why? Why? Because the next verse tells us, see. Success always begins with the decision to forget and the ability to see. Come on, give Jesus a big hand. The word see, vision. You enter into 2023, the first thing you must do is not to see, but to forget. There are things that you need to leave behind. There are things you need to say goodbye to. Don't carry with you. Don't bring with you anymore. Maybe you have graduated from college. Don't talk about your college anymore. Talk about your career. Maybe you just got married. Don't talk about your past relationship, your girlfriends. Come on, she's your wife now. Maybe you just got a child. Talk about parenting. Don't behave like a kid anymore. You got a kid at home right there. Maybe you reach retirement. Come on, accept that you're retired. Kairos Chronos, right? So what is the thing? The last sermon, I'm going to talk about this. Beautiful. All right? So, sorry, I'm not going to wait for 5 more weeks. So, forget. Say goodbye so that you can see. If you don't, you can never see. See your future. To see God is doing a new thing. Many times, we like to enter the new year, my new year resolution, so much of me, I, me, myself. I think that's a wrong attitude. I mean, you want to do that, fine, go ahead. But that is a wrong attitude. What does God want to do? I partner with Him. It's so easy to come with so much of self-confidence. I want you to be confident, but not self-confident, right? Nobody wants to hang out with a no-confident guy. God confidence. So easy to say, I want to do this, I can do this. If everything is you can do it, I tell you, it is not God doing it. I'm serious. I mean, you can do it, no problem. But you can never live a significant life because everything you do is man, never God. You will never see miracle. And you envy those who do miracles and those who experience miracles. There will never be miracles in your life. What does God want to do? Not what do I want to do. What does God want to do in my business, in my workplace? I want to see that miracle. So see, God is doing a new thing because you've forgotten the former things, right? Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? You're able to see earlier, clearer, and further. Sorry if you were here yesterday. I'm repeating. In your workplace, your family, your life. Earlier, clearer, and further. Ability to see. Do you have a vision of what God is doing? Instead of looking at obstacles and complain, see the opportunities that God has made, because He says, I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. God is making a way for you, 2023. Don't try to make your own ways, get your own connection. You know, we all do that, and we say, well, they're smart. Of course they're smart, but sometimes you get in God's way. He has so much things for you that it's not according to what you expect and your plan. Let Him do the things.
Christ be magnified.